2016 was a really big year because Sony announced the PS VR, which not only validated the future of VR games by having a big brand like PlayStation making a pretty big jump into the VR realm, but it also showed that PlayStation once again was at the height of cutting edge technology. So what was Xbox doing, over there with the Xbox One? Well, honestly, nothing too much with the Xbox brand, but Microsoft still was cooking something up with their mascot, Master Chief, to let the world know that, hey, we get that VR is the next big thing too. Yeah, there's a lot of VR games that have been pumped out throughout the years, and today we're going all the way out into the forgotten zone to talk about some of these games. But first, this video does have a sponsor. War Thunder came through. Honestly, if you haven't checked it out already, you're missing out. It's like the ultimate vehicle combat game that's out there. You get to control a whopping 2,500 different tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 different major nations. From old school biplanes to modern fighter jets and main battle tanks, they've got it all. Once you dive in, you're in for some seriously intense combat. The graphics look super realistic, and the sound effects make you feel like you're right in the middle of the action. Plus, with a massive community of over 70 million players worldwide, you'll never run out of opponents to challenge. So this game's cool whether you're a military buff or just love a good adrenaline rush. War Thunder is something for everyone. And War Thunder runs on the super sleek Dagger engine, which is all about delivering top-notch performance. So even if you're running a lower-end machine like I somehow still managed to do, you can still enjoy a lag-free gaming experience with stunning visuals and still get those high frame rates. So if you're ready to dive in, War Thunder is free to play on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, and here's a sweet deal. If you use our link provided in the pinned comment or video description, new players or returning players who haven't played in 6 months will score a massive bonus pack on PC or consoles. You get multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100 silver lines, and 7 days of premium account access. But act fast because this offer won't be around forever. Okay, let's get back to this video. So Microsoft teamed 343 Industries, their Halo studio, up with Endeavor One to create the first ever Halo VR experience for Windows 10 users. And oh boy, was the Halo community excited. I mean, Halo is known for having some iconic action-packed moments. I mean, can you imagine how crazy it would be to fight the Flood or use an energy sword, but in VR? Well, in 2017, the first ever Halo VR project, Halo Recruit, was officially released for free, and it was kind of just like a very, very limited tech demo. I guess this is kind of just like a tech demo for what Halo could feel like in a VR format, but honestly, why go through all the trouble of releasing this if it's very obviously going to be subpar? I don't think anyone fully expected a full-fledged Halo campaign in a VR package, especially something being released for free, but I also don't think anybody expected something as basic as this being the, first step into VR for the Halo franchise. You load up the game and you see some visuals for a quick second, and long story short, you're put into target training where you shoot some Halo guns at pictures of the Covenant. You go through a couple different waves of this target practicing essentially, and then there's a big reveal. Is that Cortana talking and Master Chief shows up? Wait, now things are starting to get interesting. Master Chief is about to get us ready for battle. Maybe we just got past the tutorial and the actual experience is about to start. Hit that Halo music, the big doors open after Master Chief's like, we need all the soldiers we can get, or whatever he says, and then the game ends. That's it. That's the entire experience. Essentially a tutorial for a game that doesn't really exist is kind of the vibe I get. I mean, I get it. The game is supposed to just be a tech demo showing off, I guess, VR, and Microsoft was using this to promote their Windows MR headset, which a couple of months ago they officially killed off. But this opened up a whole nother can of worms if you think about it. Over the years, there's been so many game developers or studios that have kind of just thrown their IP or their franchise out there for some sort of VR experience, and in turn, there's been a large number of varying results. I mean, we're talking Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, even Horizon Zero Dawn has a VR experience. So what's actually going on in these VR experiences? Well, we decided to jump in and try to figure this one out. Now, before we fully leave Halo behind and talk about some of these other games, I do have to say, for Halo Recruit being what I think was a pretty big disappointment, I was expecting something bombastic and impressive, maybe. I mean, at least cool at the least. This is not that. Ever since MCC, Master Chief Collection, finally made its way over to PC, and the modding community has been more and more active, active. There have been a couple of like fan VR projects that do look really cool. I mean, they're just taking content from older Halo games and translating them into the VR format, but at least that's something. I mean, I've always loved watching the video of someone doing the Warthog run in VR themselves, and I'll be honest, I don't have a VR headset myself. The idea of it, kind of intimidating. I feel like I'm gonna get motion sick if I wear a VR headset, but when I see stuff like this, I really do kind of want to give it a go. So in turn, we're gonna look at all of these massive VR spin-off games and see if maybe one of these games will be impressive enough to make me want to finally buy a VR headset. And I'll be honest, a lot of these games that we're gonna talk about look awful. But maybe there's something good in there. Let's try to look and be optimistic. Now, also during this time, just in 2016 when the PSVR did come out, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare was the next big Call of Duty game coming out, and there was a lot of backlash around the announcement of that game. People were sick of the advanced movement and didn't want another futuristic Call of Duty game, so Activision, already having the game like practically done and way too deep in production to like try to pivot or do something different with Infinite Warfare, just kind of doubled down, and they threw money at the marketing side of things to really try to get more people interested in Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Now I gotta say, as much as people like to just hate on Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, the campaign, not that bad. It was a little goofy maybe at the end, but for the most part, I played through it and didn't hate the whole experience. I know a lot of people who like the campaign way more than I do, so I think the range on how the campaign was received is relatively positive. But not too many people actually know that there was a VR experience tied to Call of Duty Infinite Warfare called Call of Duty Infinite Warfare Jackal Experience. It was a free little demo that lets you take on the role of a Jackal pilot, like those ships you fly around in Infinite Warfare. But this experience specifically was for VR users. Now, I don't know how much this actually helped Call of Duty's like reach in sales, because at this time in 2016, not that many people even had VR headsets, even the new PSVR. But nonetheless, this was something that Call of Duty did one time and never did it again. Now, interestingly enough, I've watched people experience this, and I gotta say, surprisingly not as bad as I thought it would be. For something that was free, I was expecting maybe something along the lines of what we saw with Halo Recruit, just like a very, very basic tech demo. But this actually looks like a very specific, curated experience with like moving parts. It almost feels akin to like a roller coaster ride or some sort of like attraction you would see at a theme park where like things are very heavily scripted, yes, but it's there to kind of immerse you in the experience, not so much be a full game that you need to play. So this one was actually kind of surprisingly not the worst thing. Okay, so yeah, the Call of Duty VR experience was pretty cool. I mean, it's in line with what you would expect for an Infinite Warfare tie-in, but in itself, it was alright. That being said, does this feel like a Call of Duty VR experience? Not at all. It's a space shooter. We're flying around in a spaceship, shooting at stuff. This feels more like what you would expect from Halo almost, but yeah, I don't really know how well this maybe represents the Call of Duty franchise as a whole, but it does remind us of some of the cool things that Infinite Warfare did do pretty well, like their world building and universe building and stuff like that with their science fiction technology. I do have to say the experience is relatively short. I feel like most people can experience most of what this has to offer in less than 10 minutes. So a little bit on the significantly shorter size, especially for something that you have to still take time out of your day to go to the store, download it, wait for it to get ready, then jump on and play it, and then it's just over very quickly. But I do think ultimately not enough people experienced it, and that might have contributed to why Activision moving forward never chose to do like a little VR spin-off game literally ever again. Maybe they were hoping that a bunch of the PSVR players would then translate over to more Call of Duty Infinite Warfare players, but maybe it didn't have that much of an impact at the end of the day. I would like to see a full-on Call of Duty VR experience be made in some way, but it has to be, you know, purposeful. It can't just be something random. Maybe like a VR version of All Gillied Up from Call of Duty 4. That translated could be really cool. Or remember that AC-130 level from Modern Warfare? Then they brought it back as a Spec Ops mission in Modern Warfare 2. That could be really cool if you could do like a co-op VR experience where one person's up in the AC-130 and the other person's on the ground and you're in VR and you could see them covering you. There's a lot of other options that they could do with VR moving forward. I just don't know if they're really going to be all that open to the idea of coming back and trying this again after probably Infinite Warfare Jackal Experience, or whatever it's called. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare Jackal Assault Experience. It probably didn't move the needle all that much on Call of Duty Infinite Warfare pre-orders. Okay, now I think it's important though, after talking about Infinite Warfare, that we talk about Wolfenstein Cyber Pilot. The last two main entry Wolfenstein games have been really awesome. But how would a VR Wolfenstein experience work? I mean, there's a lot they could do with atmosphere and world building, so that could be interesting. But after the release of Wolfenstein 2 New Colossus, the Wolfenstein series was kind of doing a weird thing that was unprecedented to its own franchise and a lot of other franchises too. Bethesda did something similar to a Fallout New Vegas type of thing, where they took Wolfenstein and did a spin-off type game made by a different developer. But unlike Fallout New Vegas, which took place in its own universe, Wolfenstein Youngblood took place in the same timeline. Matter of fact, it technically is a sequel to Wolfenstein 2 with a time jump moving the story forward 19 years, and it follows BJ Blazkowicz's children. Now, the studio in charge of this wasn't Machine Games, who had made the first two Wolfenstein games. This was actually given to Arcane Lion, who was known for doing like the Dishonored Death of the Outsider game expansion thing. And while this game obviously was kind of the standalone expansion that Wolfenstein had done in the past, like they did with Old Blood and Wolfenstein 1, this game actually wasn't very well received. I'll be honest, it wasn't really the worst experience, and I don't think it deserved as much criticism as it did end up getting. But yeah, it definitely felt like a watered down Wolfenstein experience, and the fact that the narrative was still this big important thing that's going to drive Wolfenstein into Wolfenstein 3, this game that's not as good as the other two Wolfenstein games kind of automatically gets elevated to required material for people who are following the story. So I think overall that maybe dissatisfied a lot of fans because the game isn't at the same standard that the previous games were at. They just took a big risk, and I don't think they quite stuck the landing. But to coincide with the release of this game, because if one spin-off game released in this year wasn't enough, they did another one, which was the VR experience, Wolfenstein Cyber Pilot, which takes place just like a week before Wolfenstein Youngblood, which is even more required material, except this time around it's a VR only experience, which, already was a little bit of a weird move, but who knows? Maybe this one crushes Youngblood and is the definitive, in-between game. I don't think it really ended up being that. This game is unlike the mainline Wolfenstein games. In this one, instead of, running around with a gun and sneaking around and doing stuff like that, we are essentially a hacker who gets control of various vehicles that the enemy faction uses, and we go and cause havoc. Logistically speaking, it is kind of cool to see something like this mixed with VR, where we're controlling something, but there is also something kind of weird about the VR experience being something to put us in another experience. We're playing the role of a hacker who's plugging into something else. But you know what? This game, for what it is, while a lot of the atmosphere and some of the experiences are kind of cool, it is incredibly short. Offensively short. Coming in with just about a runtime of about 2 total hours, it's very surprising that Bethesda thought that they could release this VR experience for $20 and not expect backlash from the fan base when the overall clock time of this experience is just 2 hours. This isn't like a case of what Call of Duty Infinite Warfare did, where they did this free little tie-in to hype up the game, which they easily could have done with this to hype up Youngblood. But I think overall the narrative here is a little bit too thin to justify its existence, and then of course the game being so short and not having a whole lot of replayability, it probably contributed to the bad reputation that this game has. Well, hopefully though, when Wolfenstein 3 one day releases, whenever Machine Games gets around to it, maybe it'll tie things up and kind of land things for Wolfenstein on a good note. I have some crazy theories about what might happen in that, but that's a whole sidetrack thing. You know what? I'll fill you in with my crazy theories anyways. You remember how in Wolfenstein 2, that one German dictator that we can't say his name in the video shows up briefly? He's old and sickly and completely lost his mind. I have a feeling that Wolfenstein 3 is going to take place a couple of years further down the line from Wolfenstein Youngblood, and this dude is still alive somehow in a mecha form, because they did that in the old school Wolfenstein games. That's my fan theory. I have no idea if that'll actually happen, but man, wouldn't it be awesome if it did happen? Okay, let's move on to the next game. Okay, since there was a long list of VR games we wanted to look at, I asked Luke to take a closer look at some of these other VR games that I might not have time to fully research, and there were 2 Star Wars VR experiences that have officially released, and Luke checked those ones out.
Yeah, as Elijah just said, there's 2 main Star Wars VR games that came out recently. One is called Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, which is a first-person shooter game that has its own little story where you fight alongside characters like C-3PO. And I mean, it's pretty short, but I still kind of like the way it looks, and I would totally play it if I played VR more often. The same kind of goes for the other game, which is called Vader Immortal. It is an episodic story that is told in 3 parts and is set between the Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One. You play from the perspective of a smuggler that is held captive by Vader, but Vader also uses you to, like, you know, activate some ancient artifact, which, I mean, seems a little out there, but I mean, could still be a cool story. I don't want to read too many spoilers because I might actually play this in the future. And I mean, from watching some gameplay, there was some cool looking lightsaber fights, and I think that's like one of the most fun parts about these Star Wars VR games, like swinging the lightsaber and stuff. The only downside is that the episodes are super short. They're like 45 minutes each, and they're like $10 each. So for the whole set, you'd have to pay $30 for like 2.5 hours of gameplay, which that seems a little steep. But there's also one more VR game that I think Elijah didn't even know about, and that is Star Wars Pinball VR, which is kind of just like, you know, you just have a bunch of Star Wars themed pinball machines, and that's really it. There isn't much to this game, but I guess if you want to play pinball in VR, there you go.
Okay, so not too long ago, we did an entire video about all of the Assassin's Creed spin-off games, and besides the, you know, criticism video got because of my terrible pronunciations of many things in the Assassin's Creed lore, we did look at Assassin's Creed Nexus, the more recently released VR Assassin's Creed game. And you know what? After looking at games like Wolfenstein, and looking at games like Call of Duty, Infinite Warfare, Jackal Assault, that are just these little tie-in experiences, I was significantly surprised to find out that they put a lot of effort and resources into making an Assassin's Creed VR experience in Assassin's Creed Nexus. Now, like I said in that video, this is an interesting game. It brings in 3 characters from previous Assassin's Creed games and has like these different episodic events that you go and experience these locations in VR, but you also experience what it's like to be an assassin in VR in a first-person perspective, and that's really cool. And this game wasn't just like a little tech demo like Halo Recruit to show what it would be like to have a full Assassin's Creed VR game. This thing's probably the closest thing to a full-fledged Assassin's Creed VR game. There is a full narrative story connecting things together. There's a long runtime for a VR game. There's actually a lot to do, and just in general, I'm impressed with how much effort was put into this game with how low the bar has been set for a lot of VR titles so far. Now, of course, there are some criticisms that could be made here, like the game itself could get a little repetitive after a while, but they did a pretty decent job at still trying to flesh out a game where at least at the end of the day you're like, okay, this was a real game and not just like some little throwaway thing. Sure, it might not be like the 20 to 40 hours that the newer Assassin's Creed games are, this one clocking in at about 12 hours or so, but at least that compares to kind of the length that some of those older Assassin's Creed games were, so you are getting a true to form Assassin's Creed experience at the end of the day. Now, of course, it would have been nicer if the story was more cohesively tied together between the 3 characters, but they're kind of more like little episodes. But I gotta give it credit, it's probably one of the longest narrative-driven VR experiences that is out there right now, so as much as there are flaws about this game, comparatively, I feel like this is one of the better VR games that is out there, and one that actually leans me towards wanting to experience. Like, I want to maybe see what's going on here, so I mean, pat on the back for Ubisoft for doing something different. Now, apparently the game sold not well. Not well at all, where the CEO of Ubisoft has said that they're probably not going to be pursuing any more Assassin's Creed VR experiences. Wow, that's kind of sad.
Did you know that Final Fantasy 15 had a fishing game spin-off that released on PlayStation 4 VR? Monster of the Deep Final Fantasy 15 released in November of 2017, and I mean, there's not much to say to it. It is a fishing game. You just fish with like Final Fantasy creatures, I guess. Now, I was reading up on this game, and it actually said that this started development as a first-person shooter spin-off to Final Fantasy 15, and then later was changed to a fishing game. That is, I guess, an interesting turn of events, but I don't think the actual game is that fun or was that good. And I feel like not many people know about this one because, I mean, there's only a niche audience that actually would have played this, because also on top of it just being a fishing game, it was also $30 on release. So I feel like that's a hefty price to pay for a game like this.
Okay, I love the Dark Pictures anthology. For better or worse. It's a little glitchy sometimes, but nonetheless, I love the series. So a VR experience has to be promising, right? Okay, now a lot of you know I'm a huge fan of the Dark Pictures games. For better or worse, whether they're goofy or good in storytelling, I just like the experience. I like that they're co-op games, because there's not enough co-op games nowadays, it feels like. So I played through all of the main Dark Pictures games, and apparently there's a VR Dark Pictures game. But before that, the same developer, Supermassive Games, who also had made the Until Dawn game, they did a VR experience called Until Dawn Rush of Blood. And this was all the way back in 2016 when the the PSVR was first releasing. Now this game released at $20 and serves as like a roller coaster side experience to Until Dawn in the form of an on-rail shooter, a literal on-rail shooter. And you know what? I think this game actually did a pretty decent job at capturing like the atmosphere and feels from Until Dawn and translating them into a VR type experience, even if you're locked to like an on-rail type shooter. Now, of course, this game did get criticism for being relatively short, clocking in at, once again, about 2 hours. It seems to be like the golden time length for these VR games, but the game did get some praise because there is a little bit of replayability where some players wanted to go back and try things again. So at the very least, there's that, which is better than some VR experiences where it's just kind of like one and done. So years later, though, we found out we're getting a spiritual successor to that game, but this time it's in the Dark Pictures universe, and it's called Dark Pictures Switchback. It's another roller coaster ride. Okay, so I'll give credit where credit is due. It does seem like they listened to some of the feedback from the first one and tried to expand and improve the game a bit. This time around, the runtime of the game can clock in as long as 4 to 6 hours, which is way better than before. Though it retailed at $40, it can be picked up on sale now, but what? Okay, so the game is an improvement in length and the way that some of the visuals are presented and the atmosphere is cool. This time around, it pays a ton of homage to a lot of the locations, storylines, and other things that you saw throughout the various Dark Pictures game, which is really cool if you've experienced those games, because now it's like, hey, look, remember when you did this and you saw this and whatnot? And there is this extra level of interaction where some of your player choices impact the outcome of the ride or the character, and that's cool. That adds a little bit more replayability if you want to see all the other outcomes. Though, for a PSVR 2 game on the PlayStation 5, visually speaking, I don't think it's like up to snuff of what you would expect for like a PS5 PSVR 2 experience. There's like some pop-in stuff going on, some of the textures seem kind of low resolution, and also as a Dark Pictures fan, you know, it was cool. We were getting a new title released every year, and then they wrapped up season 1, and we didn't get a new title for last year. We got The Quarry, which, oof, what a game that was, and our only Dark Pictures experience was this. I just hope that they really step their game up with the Dark Pictures in the future, because it's definitely feeling like we're going downhill or down a decline on this roller coaster. I had high hopes for it though, I really did.
Doom actually got 2 VR spin-offs in recent years. The first one was Doom VR that released in 2016, and I think it's kind of like the same style as Doom 2016 was, like graphically and also like gameplay wise and asset wise. And you know, people say it's a pretty good game, though I have seen criticism that it's very short, with it only being like a 3-hour campaign. So I think people liked it, but they wish there was more content. And that is actually why I've seen people argue that the next VR Doom game is actually better, which is Doom 3 VR Edition, which released in 2021, which is all of Doom 3 just ported into VR. I do find it interesting that they did this, because I always thought Doom 3 was like one of the more hated Dooms, but when I was younger and I played it, I kind of enjoyed it. So I think it's kind of cool that they made this, and you know, with it being all of Doom 3, this is probably like 11-12 hours worth of campaign gameplay, which actually is kind of a pretty decent length if we compare it to some of the other VR spin-offs that are way shorter.
Okay, I actually was really surprised to find out that Horizon Zero Dawn had a VR spin-off game? Horizon Call of the Mountain? Ah, the VR Horizon Zero Dawn game. Surely this game has to be good. It's $60, which is like the full price of a retail game. That being said though, the campaign does clock in at least 9 hours, which is pretty decent as we can tell for a VR game. You know what? I gotta say, I'm actually impressed with this one. I had a pretty low standard or expectation for this. I thought it would just be like a little cash grab here. But once again, I think that this one might have actually been a pretty well polished and thought through game. It doesn't have universal acclaim, of course, and I haven't actually gotten my hands on to play it, but from what I can tell, at the very least, as a potential VR purchaser, this one does look promising. Okay, the overall presentation of the game is visually beautiful. It really does feel like a AAA game built for VR experience here. Whether they reused assets from, you know, Forbidden West, whatever. They're trying to do something different. And then, from what I can tell from feedback and critiques that this game has had posted online in video form and whatnot, it seems like the controls and the basics of the game were kept simple. They didn't overcomplicate things. They just made it where it was something you could easily pick up and play without having extra confusion. Because a lot of people are still just trying to like get used to the little VR VR thing. Sure, there's criticisms out there about some of the repetitiveness of the game. And you know what? That's a fair criticism. I do see a lot of mountain climbing in these videos, like a lot of mountain climbing. But I mean, if this was a $60 game not called Horizon, and it was just like called mountain climbing adventure with some combat, I feel like people would love it. So, to each their own. I think this game probably has had too much criticism just because of the reputation that this game franchise has, when really it is one of the more polished VR experiences out there. I mean, we looked at some big stinkers already, and this is looking like a cut above the rest. I feel like with how great the world looks though, that's something that really works well with a VR experience. It's something where when you're playing through, you can take a second and look at the finer details of a game and get to appreciate some of that stuff. And those are things that I look for in a lot of games. It's one of the reasons why like Halo was so cool to me back in the day, because there was all these little details hidden around all of the maps and campaign levels as you went through. Now this level of detail being something you can look at in VR, that's the reason why some people would buy into the idea of VR in the first place. And I think that that is what PlayStation with their VR set really needs to try to push. And I think more games like this really do further the reach of people who might actually decide to invest in a VR headset.
Rise of the Tomb Raider had this DLC called Blood Ties, and in the DLC you explore Croft Manor, and it kind of got like this little side canon story that is set around, you know, the parents of Lara Croft and stuff like that. And while you can play it in a normal way that you would play the main game, there's also the option to play it in VR. And I mean, there's not much to say to this DLC. I mean, the DLC is pretty short, it's like an hour long, but I guess if you're a really big Tomb Raider fan, it is kind of cool to walk around the Croft Manor and kind of get to explore its secrets, and there's a lot of Easter eggs put into this. So I say it's good for fans, and I mean, honestly, that's probably good enough. Alien Isolation was a huge hit, and it was a very good horror game, actually. Really good game, in my opinion. But did you know they actually started development on a VR version of this game? Well, I'm not sure if this quite counts, because it's not obviously a finished VR game, but during development, the team actually received Oculus Rift development kits, and they did start developing the VR mode. And after the game release, there was modders and fans of the game that actually restored this VR mode, and you're able to actually play it if you have a VR headset. Now, apparently, this isn't very well developed, and it actually causes motion sickness because, you know, they obviously didn't quite know what they were doing, which is probably why this VR project never came out. So yeah, it's kind of a rough, like, alpha demo version of this VR mode, but still a cool little interesting story in my opinion. Another really weird one to me is Cities VR, which is supposedly the VR version of City Skylines and released in early 2022. It does seem though that this is a very watered down version of City Skylines, and a lot of key features like terrain editing and stuff like that is kind of missing. I do have to say, looking at gameplay of this, it is really funny how you're just standing there like you're a really tall person, or maybe like a Megazord from Power Rangers, but you're just like towering over the city.
Okay, then over the years, of all game series that don't even start as a game series, but we can look at like The Walking Dead, for example, has had a lot of games release just across the board in general. Not even talking about VR alone. There's been like first-person shooter games, there's been spin-offs, there's of course like the Telltale games, and then there's like some weird, like way out there games. There's like multiple NFT Walking Dead games. I feel like they just license the IP out to literally anyone who wants to give it a try. I mean, The Walking Dead Destinies came out last year, and that was a mess too. But there was 2 VR games that released for The Walking Dead, and Luke and I split up on these to investigate and try to figure out what's going on. I ended up looking at The Walking Dead Onslaught, and the trailer hypes this game up like this is like one of the most incredible Walking Dead experiences that's out there. Like, even when the actor who's with the PlayStation stuff moving around and like shooting, they even added these like artificial gunshot flashes out of the controller, like the controllers are actually shooting.
What the?
It was insane, Luke. This thing looks crazy. So I watched it. It does look hype. The graphics look disgusting. I mean, like, they have so much going for it conceptually, and then the graphics just, I don't know, maybe I'm being too judgmental. Look on the screen, guys. You can see it right now. This is what the game looks like. Yeah, so I didn't have high hopes. I watched a lot of gameplay of it. I am terrified to play it, so I don't think I'm going to play it. But from what I can tell, as janky as some of the gameplay does look, the people who've played the game and tried it out seem to genuinely have a good time. And I think it's one of those game experiences where like you jump in, you know what you're getting into, and like you're pleasantly surprised by the end, because it does kind of immerse you into like the Walking Dead world and the zombie infested world, and you get to like get into the action. I think the action is the core thing that is fun, which for a game like this I think is a really good idea. But yeah, there is just some like weird quirky things about it. I think the combat's cool, and the overall game is really short. It's like 6.5 hours long, so there's not a whole lot there content wise. But for The Walking Dead's track record, having so many just awful games that have existed, surprisingly not the worst thing. It's not like Survival Instinct. So there's that.
I mean, it is kind of nice to see a Walking Dead game that's kind of decent.
You know, I can't remember who it was, but recently I was talking to someone in a Discord call, and they were like reminiscing about Survival Instinct, that like spin-off Walking Dead game that was not good back in the day. Like talking about how much fun it was.
If I had to guess, it sounds like a Jervalen thing.
You know, but I would think so too. I would think it's Jervalen.
He's the biggest Walking Dead fan we know, right?
But this dude doesn't play anything other than Halo 2. So it can't be him.
Well, maybe he played the Walking Dead Survival Instinct.
I can't remember. I gotta go back. I gotta figure out who said that. I'll ask around and I'll get to the bottom of it, I promise. The Walking Dead had another VR game though. Saints and Sinners. You check that one out. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, similar story to what you said. Apparently, like, it was pretty decent. This might have been like an actual good game, because there was a lot of like story, and like you could make your own choices, and then the choices change the story. You kind of walk around, you craft your stuff, and you like interact with like characters and people, and you can decide to help these people. You can even decide to like kill these people if you want to, and like all that will have an effect on how the game ends and stuff. And I think it's actually pretty cool to have like a multiple choice game like that. And I mean, the graphics on that one, I mean, I haven't seen the Onslaught graphics, but graphics on that one did remind me of the Telltale games a lot. Like kind of like that cartoony, stylized.
Yeah, so it's like still like artistically chosen.
Yeah, I think the graphics are definitely with a purpose. And they even made a sequel to it that came out in 2022 or in 2023, depending on the device you're playing on. The sequel wasn't as well received, but I think it's still like got a 7 out of 10. Where the first one got like an 8 out of 10. So
that's not too bad.
Yeah, that's not too bad either. And I mean, with any of these games, I think sometimes you can pick them up on sale for real cheap. Like, I think Onslaught you can pick up for like $7 right now, which like, I mean, that's probably good price for like a couple hours of VR fun, if it's like a decent experience. And not like a nauseating experience, because there's VR games where like, you'll play and you just get really sick because like there's so much motion going on. We mentioned one, like what was that thing, the Star Wars fighter plane game. If I played that in VR, I'd just be like, you know, shooting.
I don't think we talked about it in the video, so we should talk about it. What was the name of that game?
Star Wars Squadron.
Was it Squadron VR? The one that came out like just a couple of years ago. The one that came out like where we would have expected Star Wars Battlefront 3 to come out.
We're in the good timeline.
Yeah, in the good timeline. So they like quickly pumped a different game out. The game, conceptually, pretty neat. I think I've never seen a game have a larger multiplayer fall off though than like the first week of that game to where it was like the second week. We played it, like 30 minutes on EA Access. You were like nauseous playing that, not even in VR, just the TV. So I can only imagine that game did have a VR release. We didn't get a chance to talk about in this video. So I do wonder like what that experience would be like. But then also, do you think like having a game that's like made by a AAA publisher that obviously will have technology to hopefully run at a higher frame rate, hopefully, I don't even know why I'm suggesting EA is going to care about the frame rate.
It'll also depend on the device with the frame rate and everything. There's like a lot of variables with VR. And then like the motion could still be too fast for like your eyes. I don't know. Remember how sick I got of the Fireteam Raven 2?
That wasn't a VR game either.
Yeah, that wasn't a VR game, but I had to sit on the streets of New York for like 10 minutes to like, you know.
Fireteam Raven's like an arcade game. Like we went to an arcade in New York City to play the Halo arcade game. And afterwards, Luke was just destroyed, didn't want to do anything. He just wanted to get out of that what was it, a GameWorks that we're in,
or Dave & Buster's,
something like that. You just wanted out of there.
I just ran out.
There are other games out there that have had VR ports of the existing game, and some of them do change the experience up quite a bit, like Minecraft, for example. This one's interesting to me. I feel like I played so much Minecraft in my teens that I just can't get back into it nowadays. Like I've forever burnt myself out of Minecraft somehow. But I have to say, I've watched a lot of like YouTubers who do VR Minecraft stuff occasionally, and I am always impressed with like how after a while, like if you play Minecraft in VR, it seems like a lot of the time the player can just really get invested. It's like they're actually there for them. Like that just becomes their reality. Minecraft was a really good game, I think, to port over to VR. I think it's interesting. Maybe one day I'll try it. I'm still iffy on VR stuff, you know.
My issue with the VR stuff is I only have like the Oculus Quest 1 or 2. I don't even know which one I have, like the cheap one. And like it's a decent experience to like test out. But I do wonder if like having like a full-fledged setup with like the motion sensors and the Steam VR, if that would be like really good, really fun.
You know what makes me really hesitant about getting a VR headset finally? Like after all this time, like I've never even worn a VR headset, right? I am fully intrigued by the topic of VR. Like obviously we're doing a video on it, right? I've watched all these people play these VR games. But I know that if I get a VR headset, like it's mandatory at some point you go on VR chat. And I just don't know if I'm ready to deal with VR chat people yet. Like I just feel like socially, like it just might be like too much going on for my brain, dude. It's just like too much stimulus of just weird things going on that I'm just like, am I ready to like let my brain go there just yet and experience what's going on in VR chat?
I mean, I've spent my fair share of time in VR chat and in VR and non-VR. I guess I've spent more time in non-VR, to be fair.
I guess I could play it without VR.
There's some crazy stuff going on, yeah. I mean, like, I don't know, you just pull up to a server, there's people having conversations about the wildest things you could imagine, and you just stand there, and they're all like in furry avatar or like a little anime girl, and like they're just talking about like, you know, religion or something, and it's just like the crazy experience.
The closest experience I've had to VR chat was when we played Rec Room when it came out on Xbox One or Xbox, and I just remember the Africa song with the loud Africa song.
Oh, the Shakira song?
Yeah, and it was just blasting it, and just it was so loud you could hear him coming from like a mile away as his character's like running towards you, and the song's getting louder and louder and louder, and it's just making the whole room rumble. And if that's what VR chat is like, I don't know, dude. I don't know if I'm ready yet.
I mean, Rec Room was an interesting experience. I remember we went on some role-playing servers too, and like people were very upset. There was like, we went there and there was already like 10 people trolling the roleplay server. We're just like standing there observing, not even like really trolling. We're just like watching it go down.
On the non-VR chat, and maybe back on topic a little bit, the Bethesda games, obviously, they're not forgotten VR games, but Bethesda has thrown a lot of things VR related at the wall. Skyrim VR, Fallout VR.
Wolfenstein.
Oh yeah, we talked about Wolfenstein. No Fallout 76 VR, surprisingly.
Yeah, but that's an MMO, so that would probably be a lot more work.
I'm curious to see one of two things. Are we going to see VR supported into the future with like Starfield? Maybe? And then also, there's a lot of rumors out there that there's some Bethesda remakes in the works, like Elder Scrolls 4. And I wonder if like we'll see things like Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas or Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion like brought to VR as well. I feel like that'd be an interesting experience if there's not already mods out there that let you do it.
I think Bethesda might give up on the VR stuff because like I don't think the game sold very well, and I think like a lot of them had issues with like performance, and that's, you know, a big part. And I mean, Bethesda games already have issues with performance when you play them non-VR. So like now it's like taped to your face and you're like, you know, getting like a non-steady frame rate. It's probably not good.
I just feel like VR is such a long way to go still. We talked about this actually in maybe the Assassin's Creed video, but like when it comes to VR, I feel like it's its own separate gaming industry almost, and it needs to grow organically on its own. Like publishers can't expect to see AAA numbers.
It's a niche market.
I do think it's going to be more successful than like 3D gaming, which was like what people thought was the future in 2010. Do you remember all the PlayStation 3D stuff?
Yeah, I do.
The good old days, dude.
When they lied about having 120 hertz like TVs, like the PlayStation TV had like 120 hertz, but it wasn't, or something like that, or 60. I don't remember. There was some like.
It was like 100. I think it had I remember there was something weird. It was like had a refresh rate that was high, but like the game didn't run at that rate.
Or like it wasn't, or like they didn't call it like refresh rate. They added like a verb. Like they made up their own their own term.
It has a flex refresh.
Yeah,
rate,
something like
whatever that means.
Yeah. But like for the VR stuff, I'm a little more pessimistic. I think like remember when Nintendo had a VR headset and there was like a gimmick that died.
Like the Virtual Boy.
Yeah. Like they tried. It was like there was a case back then too with like VR headsets and stuff, and that kind of faded away. And I think this is just like another like hype that like will eventually fizzle out. I mean, maybe I'll stick around like in a very niche format. But I think these like big AAA ports, I think will not see them much longer.
I would go all in on VR if someone can find me a Virtual Boy and retrofit it to have like a modern day VR headset in it, but then also that I could wear without having to use the kickstand or the tripod or whatever it was. There was like a tripod because you had to like hold your head up to it. If Nintendo decided to like start making VR headsets and they styled it after the Virtual Boy, that would be killer. They do the cardboard thing with the Labo.
Yeah, they're still,
that's as far as we're getting.
Do we have a Netflix app on the Switch yet? I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
One day. After the Netflix app, we'll get the VR headset from Nintendo.
Dude, I tried watching something on like the Wii U Netflix app like in 2017, and it did not work well. It was like chugging along. So, yeah, I don't know.
Apparently, you can still order Domino's off the Wii. So I think I've said this before too.
I think we've talked about this. Well, I mean, hey, dude. You were just really excited about Domino's on the Wii, dude.
Maybe one day. My dream.
Other games that also had VR versions. Resident Evil, they did some VR stuff. I feel like horror games translate well, typically, into VR.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The Resident Evil 4 port that came out recently apparently is very good. Like the VR port. People enjoyed that a lot. And then Resident Evil 7, I think, got a VR. And maybe Resident Evil Village. I'm not too sure. But I mean, those are good games. And I mean, I think they would play very well in VR as well. So I think the quality of those is pretty good. And I think they'll probably keep making those because like they understand that it's a niche market.
And horror games just do well.
Yeah, horror games. I mean, that's the best experience, honestly, in VR. Like, it's like, it is very scary having a headset on and then something jump at you and like it's like right in your face. Yeah, I mean, it really enhances the experiences. Where like in Minecraft or something, you're just kind of walking around. Though in Minecraft, you could get jump scared too. You turn around, some Endermen standing there. You're like, or Hero Brian.
Yeah, Hero Brian. And then No Man's Sky did a thing with their VR. They called it No Man's Sky Beyond. It's VR No Man's Sky, and that's cool. It's kind of like Minecraft, I guess, but in space.
I do wonder how like the flying part, if it's like a little nauseating.
I feel like the flying stuff, it doesn't like feel like you're constantly just like getting thrown around.
That's true.
From what I played of No Man's Sky, I've only played a little bit of it, but not like this. The Star Wars one did feel very aggressive. Especially because it's like a multiplayer game, you're being shot at and you're like panicking, trying to like maneuver, and you're like trying to not crash into stuff, and what a mess.
But I mean, yeah, I guess No Man's Sky flying's like more in a straight line, so it's probably fine. You just probably like sit there and like look around in the cockpit.
I mean, the only other thing we talked about is like Nintendo Labo VR, but do we really like? Was there really much going on with that? I mean, it's a cool idea, but
I mean, they discontinued it, so it couldn't have been that successful.
Wait, what is this thing? I looked it up. Adjustable headset for Nintendo Switch? Is this for people who don't want to build it with Labo, but still, what's the point?
I mean, that's like the high-end version, you know?
It's not made by Nintendo. So like there's the kit you make, and you put the cardboard pieces together, and you put the Switch in, and you get to play like the Labo stuff, right? But then there's like third-party companies that sell VR headsets for Nintendo Switch. So like, what is the point of this though? Like, what is this to play the Labo game if you don't want to put the cardboard pieces together? You just spend $22 and get.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the third picture, it says you can play Mario Odyssey with a Splatoon screenshot.
But this isn't VR, right? This is just like holding it up to here. And you can put a bed sheet over your head.
It's like doing this.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that... Also, what are those Joy-Cons in the picture?
Those are not official Nintendo Joy-Cons.
Those are not official Nintendo Joy-Cons. What are these pictures under product description? This... Dude, show the picture of the Switch VR goggles headset picture when you scroll down to product description with the couple. This does not exist. There's no one in the world.
The picture. What's she looking at? Like he has to. It's not connected to a TV. It's not how it works.
She's looking
at the wall. Like what? Also, it's clearly photoshopped on the guy. It's not even sitting on his nose.
Look at the YouTube part. Watch in VR. Watch in normal. Watch in VR. And it's Thanos like popping up on the screen.
Who's watching Avengers Endgame on like YouTube, by the way?
Yeah, wait. And he's watching a Fortnite Let's Play. Let's be real.
Type-C hole. I don't like the way they like described it.
Not a port.
Type-C hole. I don't want like anything to do with that.
The reason I bought this is because LCD screens, which should be illegal for manufacturers to make anymore, along with anything that uses micro USB and AAA batteries are always getting broken or go bad. It's time to quit making LCD and make only OLED or something better. Even the old CRT were not as bad of being broken or going out as LCD. What is he talking about?
I mean, that's some extremist OLED fan, you know?
Are LCDs what? Like, is there something controversial about them I don't know about?
No, I mean they're outdated.
I mean, they don't
kind
look
of, and they're cheap.
Yeah, I mean, like
but,
OLED looks nice,
but it's not that serious. Like,
why should they be illegal? Same with USB.
So there's
micro USB and AAA.
like
batteries.
the new Nintendo console. There's like leaks that it's gonna be an LCD screen, and that would be kind of bad because like I don't know, they're just gonna release an OLED version a year later. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, that's what happened with the Steam Deck, right? They did
Yeah.
the Steam Deck and then Steam Deck OLED.
Yeah, I think we need to start at the OLED, not like make people.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know if it's that serious that I would say like it should be illegal to sell LCD screens.
It should be illegal. We're getting really off track here. I'm sorry, guys. Thanks for watching this video, though. Big thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Go play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox, and register using our link in the pinned comment or video description. New players and those who haven't played in 6 months will score an awesome bonus pack with premium vehicles, in-game currency, and more on all platforms. And yeah, if you're new, make sure you subscribe and notifications on so you can see more things like this. And then we talk about a subject, we do like the nice highly edited video, and then we kind of kick back and we talk more casually about like the broader scope of the subject. And it's a cool little like mix that we've been trying out. So yeah, maybe subscribe, especially if you're on TV. I know it's like 2 extra clicks, but it does go a long way. And yeah, I feel pretty good about this video overall.
Yeah.
We'll see you all next time with our next video.
Bye-bye.
Bye.